Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead Applicant webinar on the request for proposals for federal fiscal year 21 to 2022 funds. My name is Devin Rostfer, and I am one of the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead Request for Proposal Coordinators representing the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. I am joined here today by my co-lead Jennifer Griffiths, representing the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. Before we get started, we wanted to first cover some of the acronyms that we'll be using throughout this webinar today. For example, when talking about the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead, you may hear us refer to ourselves as the Habitat SIL or the HSIL, and we may also refer to the request for proposal as the RFP. We will do our best to keep defining acronyms as needed throughout the webinar. For today's agenda, we plan to spend the first portion of the webinar covering the description of the Habitat SIL's funding opportunity, followed by an overview of the application and a summary of the submittal, evaluation, and selection process. We'll then take a short break before we spend the remainder of our time answering questions. To participate in today's meeting, we wanted to first go over the Zoom tools. For today's webinar, we are asking everyone to please mute yourselves and to keep your cameras off. Additionally, we are not answering any questions until the end of the webinar, so we're asking participants to please put any questions you have in the chat for us to come back to. Also, if you need to enable closed captions, you may do so using the closed captions icon. And if for some reason you need to speak, we ask that you please raise your hand before doing so. As a reminder, we prefer taking questions through chat. The chat is visible to everyone, so please refrain from asking any questions that have already been asked, and HSIL staff will collect and sort any questions, and we'll answer them. We'll answer what we can in the time that we have at the end. And just so everyone knows, all the Q&A entered into the chat will be published after this webinar in a questions and answer document on our website. We do have some ground rules about what types of questions we are able to address today to avoid conflict of interest or creating any competitive advantage for applicants. HSIL will only be able to answer questions about the eligibility of organizations, interpretation of the investment priorities and the implementation strategies, how to apply, general questions about terms and conditions, requirements, and where to find information. Questions HSIL will not be able to address today include questions regarding if a proposal is a good fit or competitive for funding, and we will not participate in any discussions around proposal strategy, preferred methodologies or approaches, or individual proposal ideas. Thank you for understanding. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar today, and the information will be made available on our website following this meeting. Throughout the webinar, we've done our best to include quick tips and best practices for preparing your application for this Habitat RFP. You will notice these quick tips when this yellow icon is displayed. And with that, it is time to transition into the main content of this webinar, starting with the background and the description of the HSIL funding opportunity and the investment priorities that have been established for protecting and restoring habitat in Puget Sound. The Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead is a unique multi-agency team led by Department of Fish and Wildlife and DNR staff and funded through a cooperative agreement with EPA to protect and restore habitat in Puget Sound. The mission of the Habitat SIL is to enable and accelerate habitat protection and restoration through 4 regional strategic plans known as the implementation strategies. These include the floodplains and estuaries, land development and cover, marine vegetation, and shoreline armoring implementation strategies. In addition to the Habitat SIL, there is also the Stormwater Strategic Initiative led by the Department of Ecology and the Shellfish Strategic Initiative led by the Department of Health. The Habitat Strategic Initiative leads are stewards of the implementation strategy programs to support Puget Sound recovery partners and communities to implement and achieve outcomes defined by the implementation strategies to make progress towards healthier Puget Sound habitat. The habitat vital signs for streams and floodplains, forests and wetlands, estuaries and beaches, and marine vegetation measure the recovery community's progress towards improved habitat availability and function. While undertaking this work, our goal is also to advance benefits for climate resilience and adaptation, environmental justice, and tribal treaty rights. The HSO works to achieve these outcomes for Puget Sound habitat through convening, creating, and supporting collaborative partnerships, strategic integration of habitat priorities into planning, and supporting catalytic and strategic investments of funding into Puget Sound habitat. Section 320 of the Federal Clean Water Act authorizes the National Estuary Program, which provides HSIL funding through the Puget Sound Geographic Program. Puget Sound Geographic Program funds are intended to support the implementation of the 2022 to 2026 Action Agenda for Puget Sound, which serves as the shared recovery plan for Puget Sound. The Strategic Initiative Leads published a joint investment plan in June of 2022, which outlines our investment priorities for federal fiscal years 2021 and 2022 Puget Sound Geographic Program funds. These investment priorities were highlighted in a webinar in June, which was recorded and is still available online. The Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead developed its investment priorities through convening our 14-member Strategic Initiative Advisory Team, which is also known as the SIAT. The SIAT met for over 23 hours of meetings to establish 5 investment priorities. With that overview and background, now we will walk you through a high-level overview of each of Habitat's investment priorities. The HSIL's 5 investment priorities are changing planning paradigms, supporting project development and readiness, encouraging behavior change, building regulatory support, and increasing information and evaluation necessary to support policy, implementation, and decision-making. When developing your proposal for HSIL funding, we are asking applicants to apply for only 1 investment priority per application. For each investment priority, the RFP includes a description of the investment priority, objectives, potential activities that could be eligible for funding, and there are tables that summarize how investment priorities connect to the outcomes that are needed in the habitat implementation strategies and action agenda. For today's webinar, I will only be focusing on the description of each investment priority, starting with our first investment priority, changing planning paradigms. This investment priority supports the integration of habitat recovery priorities and nature-based solutions into planning and implementation frameworks in Puget Sound. By catalyzing change within planning frameworks and collaborative partnerships, habitat priorities are incorporated earlier into planning efforts and design solutions, creating a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable future for Puget Sound communities and ecosystems. Priority B is focused on increasing project development and readiness. This investment priority supports investing in the harder to fund aspects of habitat protection and restoration projects that are necessary to get projects shovel ready to enable both faster and broader implementation. Shovel ready is defined as having all of the necessary capacity and project elements in place to successfully compete for implementation funds, such as construction or acquisition funding. By investing in project development and readiness, subrecipients will be better positioned with shovel-ready projects and strategic suites of projects to leverage funds for implementation. And this should enable habitat benefits for ecosystems, critical species, and people to be more quickly realized. Priority C is focused on accelerating and incentivizing behavior change of individuals to implement best practices for habitat protection and restoration. By inspiring behavior change, more individuals, communities, and organizations will make decisions and take actions that result in increased protection, restoration, and stewardship of habitat, including climate resilient habitat functions and connectivity. Priority D is focused on increasing regulatory support by increasing staff capacity, guidance, and tools to support the improved implementation of regulatory programs. By investing in regulatory support, Habitat will be better restored and protected for providing the necessary support to ensure regulatory programs achieve their stated goals, which therefore increases ecosystem resilience under climate change and contributes to sustaining opportunities for harvest under tribal treaty rights. And finally, priority E is focused on collecting and compiling the information necessary to support decision-making, policy development, planning, and implementation of habitat protection and restoration. This priority includes evaluations to identify lessons learned and best practices to support adaptive management of projects and programs, transfer of knowledge, and filling knowledge gaps for program or policy implementation. The intent is to improve the effectiveness of actions, projects, programs, and policies that protect and restore habitat processes and function. The total funding available for this RFP is up to $9 million for investment in Puget Sound, and the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead intends to invest approximately $1.8 million per investment priority. This is dependent on the number of eligible proposals, the technical merit of applications, and the diversity of the funding portfolio and applicant organizations. HSIL is accepting applications ranging from $200,000 to $800,000 for awards ranging from 2 to 4 years. Applicants who are eligible, this will be the only funding opportunity within the current HSIL cooperative agreement to provide longer-term funding awards up to 4 years. Therefore, HSIL encourages proposals with longer durations and higher funding requests to support implementation of multi-year phases of work that can scale within the award period. Proposals must connect to the implementation strategies and action agenda to be considered. While applicants should only apply for one investment priority per application, organizations are allowed to submit multiple applications. The lead fiscal agent for the project should be the submitting organization. And for this funding round, HSIL prefers to fund no more than 2 applications for each of the primary applicant organizations. Organizations may receive funding as partners on additional applications if they choose to be involved with applicant coalitions. Applicants who are eligible for this funding opportunity include units of local government, conservation districts, nonprofit and non-governmental entities, Washington state government agencies, federally recognized tribes, tribal consortia, institutions of higher learning within the United States, and special purpose districts, including planning units, management boards, and other intrastate organizations. Ineligible applicants include for-profit organizations and federal agencies. To improve coordination, likelihood of success, and to reduce duplication of applications, HSIL is encouraging applicants within the recovery community to form applicant coalitions, which are partnerships between multiple organizations for proposal development and implementation. For proposals with applicant coalitions, HSIL recommends that the applicant coalition identifies the primary fiscal agent to submit the proposal and serve as the proposal lead for administrative requirements and reporting. Proposals with coalitions should describe any anticipated subawards for coalition members in your budget. Federal agencies may be included as partners in coalitions, but are not eligible for subawards. Coalitions should also not include for-profit organizations. Competitive procurement processes are required for any contract procurement and services provided by for-profit organizations. So what types of proposals are most appropriate for this funding opportunity? HSIL encourages proposals that pilot new approaches, test alternatives, help build capacity, and investments that catalyze longer-term lines of work that can be implemented over multiple years. And as a reminder, all proposals must implement the 2022 to 2026 action agenda and habitat implementation strategies. Some examples of type of work that are the best use for this funding opportunity are activities that have fewer dedicated funding sources, such as communications, education, outreach, incentives, funding for program development and administration, research, including data collection, analysis, and synthesis, and staff capacity. Additionally, Puget Sound geographic funds help fund activities necessary to get project shovel ready to successfully and competitively apply for capital funding for construction and acquisition. This includes funding for site visits, planning, technical assistance, assessment, feasibility studies, and design work necessary for implementation. HSIL is proud to announce that match is not required for this funding opportunity, which further reduces barriers for organizations to apply for and receive HSIL funds. As a reminder, the geographic scope for this funding opportunity is the Puget Sound region, which includes the Puget Sound and related inland marine waters, all salt waters of Washington state, inside the international boundary line and east of where the Strait and the Pacific Ocean meet. All rivers, streams, and watersheds draining into Puget Sound and water resource inventory areas 1 through 19 are also eligible for funding. Proposals outside of Puget Sound are not eligible. Organizations may submit multiple applications, but as a reminder, please have the lead fiscal agent submit your application. The request for proposals opened on October 4th and will be open for 9 weeks with applications due December 6th, no later than 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. HSIL will complete proposal evaluation in January and intends to announce a funding recommendation and notification to successful applicants by February of 2023. HSIL will host a webinar for successful subrecipients in either late February or March. The earliest date that subawards can begin work is April of 2023, and HSIL's goal is to have all of the subawards complete and ready to begin work by July of 2023. The period of performance for these awards is 2 to 4 years, with all work needed to be complete by June of 2027. Now that we've presented an overview of the funding opportunity and investment priorities, I am now going to hand the presentation over to Jennifer Griffiths, who will provide an overview of the HSIL application and how to apply.
Thank you, Devin. And please do chime in if my audio is breaking up. I, of course, was getting some bandwidth warnings. So we'll just take a pause to correct course if anyone's having difficulty understanding me. So the application is now available to download from our website for applicants to review and complete. The application has approximately 13 questions, which ask applicants for a thorough proposal description, the impact and key outcomes associated with the proposal, how the proposal will incorporate cross-cutting considerations for climate resilience and adaptation, environmental justice, or tribal treaty rights, and the proposal budget. And I'm going to review each of these sections briefly. For the proposal description, applicants are asked to provide an introduction and background to their proposal, as well as a description to the approach and methodology, including the scope of work and other technical considerations. Applicants should consider details regarding major tasks, deliverables, and timeframes for associated work with their projects, as well as any details on plans for ground disturbing work. Furthermore, applicants are asked to describe their programmatic capability, including their project team, competencies and expertise, as well as any partnerships associated with the proposal. And finally, applicants are asked to describe their readiness to proceed and any potential risks associated with the project and how they might reduce potential for challenges and delays while we're managing these risks and uncertainties. For measures of impact and key outcomes, applicants are asked to describe how their proposal advances one of the 5 investment priorities from the Habitat Strategic Initiative LEAD RFP, and describe any of the anticipated outcomes associated with their proposal, including habitat benefits and other multi-benefits that are immediate or long-term. Where possible, applicants are asked to quantify benefits. In this section, applicants should describe how the proposal connects to and implements the Puget Sound 2022 to 2026 Action Agenda and the Habitat implementation strategies. A summary of habitat implementation strategy outcomes is provided for each priority in the RFP, and you must reference at least one outcome from the relevant tables when completing this portion of the application. Applicants are also asked to incorporate climate change adaptation or resilience, environmental justice, or upholding and protecting tribal treaty rights into their proposal. Applicants may address more than one of these cross-cutting considerations to be considered. However, only one is required. Finally, for the budget, applicants are asked to describe their proposal budget using whole dollar amounts, including a description of how costs were estimated. Where relevant, applicants should include cost estimates and description for personnel, fringe benefits, travel expenses, equipment, supplies, contractual expenses, and other costs such as partner subawards, as well as indirect costs. More detail is provided in the RFP and in the budget template provided as an appendix to the RFP. While developing your proposals, timelines, and budgets, HSIL also encourages the applicants to incorporate required tasks associated with this funding source into your full scope of work. This is important to ensure applicants have enough time and staff capacity in the scope of work and budget for the required tasks. In the application, required tasks are shown as tasks 1, 2, and 6, and they are also described in the attached sample statement of work template in the appendix. These include project development, including a fact sheet, required project administration and reporting, and broader impacts and communications, as well as including attending the Salish Sea Ecosystem Conference. Included in Task 1 are also conditional subtasks that depend upon the activities proposed. For example, quality assurance project plans are required for proposals with any environmental data collection, analysis, or modeling. Additionally, there are information collection requirements associated with performing surveys, questionnaires, or other information gathering. It includes over 10 people. And finally, cultural resources requirements are applicable for any projects proposing ground disturbing activities. Any activities that require the completion of these conditional subtasks will not be reimbursed for and should not begin before the requirement elements are submitted and approved. If your project might include these elements we just described, we recommend that you include enough time and capacity into your scope of work and budget to complete these conditional subtasks. And completing these conditional subtasks are eligible for reimbursement. We also want to remind applicants that there are more details for the various terms and conditions associated with receiving and managing funds through the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead. You can review these terms and conditions by viewing the sample award template that's included in Appendix 4. We recommend that you consider these terms and conditions as you develop your proposals and budgets to be sure that you can completely implement the work you are proposing. Finally, we'd like to remind applicants to please complete the EPA 4700-4 form required for pre-award compliance, and it's included in the application itself. We're going to review some additional resources to support application development at the end of the presentation. Now I will walk through briefly how the HSIL will evaluate and select proposals for funding. The strategic initiative leads for habitat, shellfish, and stormwater have established 6 shared evaluation criteria that are consistent across our SILs. These criteria are methodology, measure of impact, programmatic capability, project team and partnerships, budget, cross-cutting considerations, and best use of funds. For the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead, an application has 70 possible points. The evaluation criteria, definitions, and evidence evaluators will use and possible points are included in the RFP, and I will briefly go over these here. For methodology, with up to 20 points available in the evaluation, the criterion evaluates the proposed scope of work, including the work plan, methodology, technical approach, and timeline for implementation. For measure of impact, also worth 20 points, this criterion evaluates the anticipated outcomes associated with the proposal, including scope, scale, location, and magnitude of impact. This criterion also considers how the proposal advances priority outcomes in the habitat implementation strategies on the 2022 to 2026 action agenda. For programmatic capability, project team, and partnerships, worth 15 points. This criterion evaluates readiness to proceed on the scope of work, including the expertise and capabilities of the application team, necessary partnerships, and public support for the work. For budget, worth 5 points, this criterion evaluates whether the proposal's total funding request is consistent and reasonable given the proposed methodology, measure of impact, and scope of work. Cross-cutting considerations, worth 10 points. This criterion evaluates whether the proposal's likelihood to advance the following, this criterion evaluates the proposal's likelihood to advance the following priorities for Puget Sound geographic funds: environmental justice, climate change resilience and adaptation, or tribal treaty rights. And finally, the best use of Puget geographic funds, which is unscored, related to our selection criteria. This criterion evaluates if the proposal is a good fit for Puget Sound geographic funds, consistent with the EPA funding guidance that the strategic initiative leads. Evaluators will score and discuss proposals and provide a funding recommendation. The HSIL final selection of proposals for funding will consider the evaluation score, the proposal's connection to the implementation strategies and the 2022 to 2026 action agenda, the distribution of funds geographically across applicant organization and types of work, and the duration of time needed for implementation, and if the proposal fits the characteristics for best use of funds that we described earlier. The HSIL plans to announce our funding recommendation by the end of February 2023, and all applicants will be notified. Applicants not selected for funding may request a debrief to discuss scores and final outcomes. To close, I will review a few additional resources and details for best practices to ensure applications are complete. We have developed an applicant checklist, which is Appendix 1 of the request for proposals, to ensure applicants have checked all the boxes to complete their applications. Before you get started on your application, identify if your organization and the activities you're seeking to implement and the geographic scope of your proposal are eligible for funding from the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead. Additionally, determine if your proposal requires and is a good fit for an applicant coalition. Coalitions are encouraged to improve coordination, increase the likelihood of success, and reduce any duplication of efforts within a geography or a type of work. During proposal development, remember to identify the investment priority and habitat implementation strategy outcomes associated with your proposal. So review the 5 investment priorities and determine which one is best describes the category of work you're trying to accomplish. Don't forget to connect your proposal to 1 or more habitat implementation strategy outcomes, and be sure to integrate at least 1 cross-cutting consideration for climate change resilience and adaptation, environmental justice, or tribal treaty rights into your proposal. Additionally, we recommend that you visit the implementation strategy websites, look at the fact sheets for each implementation strategy, each 2 pages, and review the relevant action agenda strategies associated with the habitat implementation strategies. All of these links are provided in the applicant checklist. Additionally, you may review the statement of work template, the budget template, a sample award template, which includes all of the terms and conditions associated with this funding opportunity, and to help you shape your work and be prepared to implement if your application is successful. Finally, the HSIL has included our agency statement of intent and conflict of interest to describe how our staff and our advisory team have put strong conflict of interest procedures in place to reduce any unfair competitive advantage or conflict in developing, evaluating, and selecting awards for funding. That's also included as an appendix. When moving towards application completion and submittal, the application is available as a fillable PDF from Adobe. We recommend that you have a basic Adobe program. It does not need to be a paid for subscription installed on your computers to complete the application, and that you complete it on your desktop and not in a browser. If you have any difficulties completing in Adobe, please reach out to the request for proposal coordinators, myself and Devin, and we can provide a Word version of the document if you have any challenges. You do not need to complete your application all at once. You may save it and work on it over time. And when it's time to submit, the submission is via email. We're asking you submit only the application and no additional documentation, and no letters of support are required or requested. When submitting via email, we ask that you use the standard naming convention to help us in screening and sorting, and we've provided that in the request for proposals. Please also include that same naming convention in your email subject line and email applications to the following 2 emails. When you have submitted your application, you should automatically receive an auto-generated email from box.com confirming your successful upload, and a request for proposal coordinator will confirm as well the receipt of your application within 5 business days. So if you have any questions throughout this process, please contact Devin and myself through email, and we will happy to answer your questions and conclude them in our question and answers document or FAQ document that will be updated on our website. We intend to update this document weekly, assuming we get new questions at that frequency. We won't be having one-on-one meetings at this time to answer questions, but instead we'll be answering all questions in writing. As a reminder, applications will be due on December 6th at 5 p.m. And I believe I'll come back to that point again. And final note that we're going to recuse ourselves from meetings on proposal development that might be happening in the broader community during kind of broader meetings that might be scheduled from networks that we all participate in. So you can visit our website, pugetsoundestuary.wa.gov/habitat-sil-rfp. And there you'll find all the information we've been discussing today, and likely you've already been there as you found access to this webinar. And we'll be updating the frequently asked questions there regularly, and we'll be providing a copy of this webinar recording as well. As a reminder, applications are due December 6th by 5 p.m. Pacific time. On behalf of myself and my colleague, Devin Rossifer, we want to thank you very much for attending today. We look forward to answering your questions that we can today. We also want to acknowledge our Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead team that has made this funding opportunity a reality. They are advancing our implementation strategies and moving forward the action agenda, and working closely with all of our partners to advance our sub-award investments. So thank you very much for tuning in. We are going to take a 5-minute pause, and then we will begin the question and answers session facilitated by Elizabeth Spalding, who is our Marine Vegetation Implementation Strategy Lead.
Just a reminder, during our 5-minute break, if you could put your questions in the chat, and we will come back to them at 1:39 p.m. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for coming back, or staying with us, I should say. We are going to move into our question and answer session. So what I would like for everyone to do is continue to enter your questions into the chat. We're going to go ahead and just go sequentially through them. Something that I want to mention is that there's a strong chance that some of these questions are going to be ones that we can't necessarily answer in full detail yet, because you're asking really good, complex questions. So in the event that we can't address them right away, do know that we will follow up and include that question in the FAQ to the best of our ability. And then Devin and Jennifer will remind you all that some of the questions we probably can't address because they're around specific project proposals. And we really want to make sure that we're looking at the technical aspects of the application and not project merit. So I'm going to go ahead and get this kicked off by first directing our question to Jennifer. Straight out of the gate, Jennifer, from Lisa, can the priority B funds be used for acquisition?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So acquisition activities are eligible but not prioritized under this funding based upon the federal fiscal year 2021 through 2025 EPA funding guidance to the strategic initiative leads, which we have linked in the RFP. The RFP highlights the activities that are best suited to the Puget Sound geographic funds and that are aligned with the investment priorities. Also stated in the RFP under the cost section are some additional details around if funds were to be used for acquisition or construction, some additional cost requirements.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is from Margaret. She asks, to clarify, as part of a group application, only the primary applicant that is counted as one of their 2 potential funded projects. So the other group members can still apply and be funded for up to 2 applications. So I think this question goes to, can they be on multiple applications as coalition members? And Devin, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that clarification, Margaret. We are preferring to fund up to 2 for the primary applicant organization, and we encourage, we are not counting any involvement in an applicant coalition as a partner where you aren't the primary fiscal applicant. We're not counting that towards the limit. So other group members that are involved in applicant coalitions may also apply for for as many applications as they would like to submit, but will only be funded for up to 2 applications per organization. An applicant coalition involvement is not counted towards that.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, can procurement begin prior to the award execution? And Jennifer, I think we'll go to you next.
I think there's a bit of nuance to that question, but we're going to reach out to our DFW contracts office and get clarification on that and respond in the FAQ document.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. For projects that are not chosen for funding, are there opportunities for them to receive any leftover money as alternates? Devin?
That's a good question. I would say that's another one that we would need to include in our FAQ document, and we'll get back to you with a response. As of now, we're hoping to fund up to $1.8 million per investment priority. And as far as leftover money, we're not sure if we will roll applications over to the next funding round or not. So thank you for asking that, and please look to the FAQ for clarification on that question.
Okay, so the next question is long, but just for clarification, for-profit ventures cannot be involved on any proposals, whether a part of a coalition or a subcontractor, or can for-profit organizations be a part of an applying coalition as long as the qualifying organization is the lead? Jennifer?
Thank you. So an applicant coalition consists of eligible applicants for funding receiving a subaward. With the primary, so that's any of the eligible organizations listed, and that does not include for-profit organizations. For-profit organizations would be included as an estimate in the intent to subcontract to a for-profit organization would be included in the description in the budget in the contractual section, and then that procurement process would need to be a competitive procurement process following the CFR 200 to then procure the services of that for-profit organization. Federal entities can be part of an applicant coalition, but they are not eligible to receive subawards.
Great clarification. Next question is around outreach limitations. So is it a limitation on number of individuals reached, in other words, surveyed, or the number of groups, or the number of specific outreach forums? Devin?
Can you repeat that question, Elizabeth? I'm actually not seeing it in the chat.
It was actually sent directly to me by accident. So this is a question on outreach limitations. Is it a limitation on number of individuals reached specifically? Is it the number of groups, or is it the number of specific outreach forums?
My understanding is, I think I'm going to defer to Jennifer on this one because it sounds a lot like it may be a question about information collection requirements, and I don't want to get it wrong.
Great.
It is 10 individuals, although I think 10 organizations, if there was no group, would also kind of come under that consideration. And that's described, you can see the specific term and condition in the, you can see the specific term and condition in the sample award template, so you can see how it's worded. And then how to move through that information collection requirement process would be something we would negotiate during the subaward negotiation for successful applicants.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so there's another question then from Max regarding clarity on the boundaries for Puget Sound in this RFP. So could you review those for us?
I would be happy to. I have the geographic scope language open right now. So the Puget Sound region is defined as Puget Sound and all of the related inland marine waters. And that includes all salt waters of Washington State, inside of the international boundary line with British Columbia, and east of the junction of the Pacific Ocean and the Strait of Juan de Fuca. All the rivers, streams, and watersheds draining to Puget Sound are also eligible for funding, and that includes water resource inventory areas 1 through 19. If you have an additional question or clarification, please feel free to follow up with that in the chat.
Great, thank you, Devin. Okay, the next question about our evaluation process. So who will assign the scores which seem to be more subjective than objective? Jennifer, do you want to take that one?
So we gave a very abbreviated overview of the evaluation process in today's webinar, but it's laid out in more detail in the RFP. So we will have an evaluation panel of evaluators who will review the proposals. Each proposal will have a minimum of 2 evaluators. We will have the scores from the evaluators and compiled, and there will be an evaluator discussion, and final scores will be given. Then the HSIL is retaining the final decision on selection, and we'll primarily base this on the evaluator scores. However, we have a value as described in the RFP of ensuring that there is equitable distribution of funds across geographies and across entities. And so in that case, we will look at the scored proposals across within each investment priority and make sure that we're achieving that value.
Great, thank you. So we did get another question regarding the geographic area. And so the question is, could projects within the Salish Sea be applicable?
I can respond to that. Projects that are located, they have to be located within Washington State's waters. So any projects located outside of Washington State's waters and international waters are not eligible for funding.
Okay, so I have one question that's come to me directly. I'm going to summarize. It's rather lengthy, but can you explain a little bit more about the one investment priority per application?
There are 5 investment. There are 5 investment priorities. We are asking that applicants select one investment priority to propose their proposal to. So when developing your proposal, think about the activities and the goal and the objectives and goals of the work you're thinking about. Pick the investment priority that best aligns with those, and on the application, you will be asked to select and check one box for which investment priority you would like your proposal considered underneath. And I think that's what I say.
Okay. So a question about where the applicants may need to be from. The question is, can he apply for this project from Bangladesh or not? Devin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As of now, only organizations located in the United States are eligible for this funding unless it's an academic institution, and all the work has to be focused on Puget Sound. And I may stand corrected on the academic institution statement, but Jennifer, do you want to chime in?
Yes, academic institutions must be located in the United States, and otherwise organizations must be like a state organization must be Washington State or Puget Sound in the case of a local government or planning unit.
Okay.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Next question, are capital projects funded such as buildings and boardwalks? Let's see. I think maybe Jennifer, it's your turn, but if one of you has a strong inclination.
I keep unmuting myself at the wrong time. So, so again, as with acquisition, capital, certain types of capital work are eligible under this funding opportunity, but not prioritized. That said, the capital activities should be aligned with habitat protection and restoration opportunities, and should have a demonstrated habitat benefit.
Okay, thank you. So we're starting to kind of circle back on some questions, but maybe dig into the weeds a bit more. So if a contractor, private for profit, is already under an agreement with an applicant for other phases of the project, is competitive procurement still required? Devin, did you want to start?
I'm actually going to refer this one to Jennifer.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to say we will verify that with our DFW contracts office and add that to the FAQ document.
Okay, great. Is there a specific boundary between the ocean and the applicable waters of Puget Sound? Devin?
I'm also going to defer this one to Jennifer because I did my best within the verbiage that is in our RFP to describe this, but I'm hearing that this may need more clarification. So thanks for asking the question.
At this time, I don't think we can give you a better definition than the exact language in the RFP, and we can look to see if we can provide any additional clarification. And to be clear, this is the broadly the similar constraints that all strategic initiative leads in Puget Sound geographic funds have. There's, you know, more broadly from the strings that come with these funds.
Right. I think it's a good reminder that this is, you know, we're a national estuary program funding with geographic funds. So that's, you know, there's some considerations there. Devin, this is a broad question. So do your best. What is the main objective of this project?
Thank you for that question. It brings us back to why we do this work, and it's to protect and restore habitat in Puget Sound, to help improve streams and floodplains, estuaries, and the beaches and marine vegetation within Puget Sound. So we encourage all applicants to connect their proposals to strategies identified in the implementation strategies and the 2022 to 2026 action agenda to make sure that we're working towards established goals for habitat in Puget Sound.
Great, thank you. There is some conversation a bit around that line, so I'll just direct folks to the chat so that they can all kind of engage in that conversation around where that line may be. We are out of questions that have come directly through chat, so I encourage, oh, here we go. We get a few more questions, but if you do have questions, please do put them in the chat. We have plenty of time today. So to clarify, this RFP also covers freshwater systems, rivers, streams, and watersheds that feed into Puget Sound and not only marine waters. The RFP says this includes all the rivers, streams, and associated watersheds draining to Puget Sound as mapped by water resource inventories 1 through 19. So I'm seeing you both nod. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Okay. Any other questions, please do put them in the chat. We will hang around for a few minutes. We actually have an entire hour remaining in our timed allotment for questions. Maybe while people ponder on last questions, I wanted to hand it over to Jennifer and Devin to just give us a little bit more, like a little overview on like just how excited our team is to like really be working with the applications and speak a little bit about this new venture as it's kind of a pivot for our team. And then I think we'll go back to some more questions. So Devin, I know that you're pretty excited about this. Do you want to talk a little bit more about just, you know, kind of how this is a new phase for our team and what we're excited about?
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I think what's exciting about this new phase of our funding model is that we were able to work with the Strategic Initiative Advisory Team, which is up to 14 technical and policy experts from Puget Sound. And we took on a collaborative process to establish investment priorities, and we brought in speakers to get us up to speed on priorities for climate change and environmental justice and tribal treaty rights in Puget Sound. So what's most exciting to me is the collaborative process and the number of stakeholders that have been involved in establishing the investment priorities, and also the work that we've done as an HSIL to collaborate with shellfish and stormwater to make these RFPs, although they are different RFPs, look and feel the same for applicants across Puget Sound who may also be applying for shellfish or funding from stormwater. So that's been the most exciting process for me. And I'm also excited to address one of the questions in the chat, is that this is a grant funding opportunity. The money does not need to be paid back. There's no match required, and we have up to 4 years for implementation. So by being able to provide almost up to $800,000 per proposal, we're very excited that we can give larger awards for longer timeframes, and that hopefully that will help build the capacity to move the needle and to support project development as there's multiple funding. You know, we're all tracking this bipartisan infrastructure law funding and future opportunities to bring more money into Puget Sound, and we feel very confident that the investment priorities that we've established in this funding round can also help leverage additional funding opportunities and get people to apply for more grants as funding becomes available for the region. Jennifer, do you want to chime in with what you're most excited about?
You covered a lot of highlights, Devin, and I just say that I think that there are a lot of innovative ideas out there thinking about how we can advance habitat restoration and protection, really building and growing support from individuals all the way through our organizations and our systems. And I think this unique Puget Sound Geographic Funds offers the opportunity to push on some of the levers that are often more challenging to fund, and to build that will and enable the ultimate habitat restoration and protection actions that we need to have those habitats available for our species and for our ecosystems and for ourselves.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we do have some more questions, so let's go back to those. The first one is around green infrastructure. So I didn't hear any mention of green stormwater infrastructure in this. Do you see a role for rain gardens and other GSI in this proposal? Maybe Devin, shall we go to you?
Yeah, without getting into the details around specific project ideas, we do prioritize the integration of habitat and nature-based solutions into planning processes. So I see green stormwater infrastructure as one nature-based solution that can achieve multiple benefits. But regarding the eligibility of competitiveness specifically for GSI, I would say based on the ground rules that we've established that I'm not able to dive into whether or not that's the best fit for this funding at this time.
Great, thank you. Some clarification around letters of support. Are they not allowed or just not requested?
Thanks for that clarification. And that was my, I think I caused that confusion. So the application, we're only asking you to submit the application PDF and no additional documents. So they are both not allowed because we're not asking for any additional documentation. And what we instead ask you to do is simply describe the partnerships you've put in place and the collaborations that you need to achieve your work and that are ongoing to achieve the application within the existing application document.
Thank you. Okay, next question. If projects earn credits under the Salish Sea Nearshore Programmatic federally, what will happen to the credits earned? Can the credits be sold, or can the projects be utilized as mitigation for other projects? Devin?
I'm going to defer this question to Jennifer.
And I think we'll have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay, great. As for limits on outreach, so another question, could funds for, say, a survey be funded through other sources than staff time related to broader oversight, design of questions, and analysis of data be funded through HSIL? Let's see, Jennifer?
The design, so the information collection requirements apply to the design of the survey as well as its actual collection. However, if there is a survey that is collected and that survey is not a part of the statement of work and it's not kind of required under the statement of work, then the analysis of that information can be funded without the additional information collection requirements.
Okay. Next question, is there any help available to assist in pairing organizations that might be a good fit, but may be small with limited staff availability with other partners to develop a more well-developed and positioned joint application? I represent a small diking district with a completely voluntary part-time board. Devin?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ariel, one of the things that we are able to do is to help. We serve as a connector at HSIL. So if you would like to reach out to us via email, we'll see what we can do to help connect you to other organizations in your area. But based on how you're describing your organization, we would certainly encourage you to explore applicant coalitions and start reaching out to local organizations or other nonprofits in the same proximity of your project to see if there are opportunities for partnerships.
Great. Other questions? Please put them in the chat. Here we go. If the goal is to bring community members on site to participate in habitat restoration, would infrastructure such as composting toilets be funded? And I think we might have to probably a similar response, but Jennifer, did you want to take this one?
I don't think I have any additional nuance, and we can update the FAQ as related to non-specific habitat restoration kind of infrastructure.
Okay.
And I would just add that you may consider looking at the shellfish funding opportunity, which has more direct connections to waste management, and would encourage you to reach out to shellfish.
Great, thank you. So some more clarification, it looks like, around for-profit organizations as part of a coalition. Since it doesn't sound like they can be included as part of a coalition, how can these partnerships with industry best be represented on applications? Who would like to take that one? Jennifer?
So I think this depends on if that for-profit, if you're asking, so I think there's two pieces. There are for-profit organizations that are not seeking to be funded under this work, but might represent a broader collaboration within the community. So with funders, with private-public partnerships that you're building that. And that I would describe under the collaborations and partnerships section as the broader context under which you are seeking to achieve this work and the collaborations that are necessary to be successful. For any for-profit entity that you would intend to have as a subcontractor to complete work under the proposal, then that should be described in kind of how the tasks are allocated and in the budget statement, and then go through the competitive procurement process to select those organizations to complete that work.
Okay, thank you. A question around the selection of an outcome from the table, but there is no reference to this within the application. Can you clarify that requirement? Devin, do you want to take that one?
I think since it's related to a reference that Jennifer made, it'd be more appropriate for her to chime in.
I believe it is stated in the application, and let me open that up so I can direct you to that, or we can correct in the FAQ document.
Okay. So while you look for that, rather than us all watch you go through a document, we can come back to that. Are there other questions from our participants? Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay.
So on the application on page 10, under measures of impact and key outcomes, the question states, describe how the proposal advances the selected investment priority. Identify at least one primary habitat implementation strategy desired outcome from the selected investment priority and explain how your proposal makes progress towards this outcome and the associated action agenda at key opportunity. So in reading that, I realized we did not say in the table. So thank you for that clarification. And Devin and I will discuss and determine if we need to provide any additional kind of amendment to the requirements in the FAQ. And we'll note that throughout the website.
Great, thank you. Other questions from our participants? Okay, we're going to go in once, go in twice. Don't see anything coming through. So Devin and Jennifer, I might hand it to you. We're starting to see some thank yous. Might hand it to you for some closing thoughts.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for facilitating this, and thank you all for attending. We want to recognize that this is a new, as Devin said, we're kind of embarking on a new phase for the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead. As some of you might be aware, this is a transition over time as to how these Puget Sound geographic funds, the structure and kind of the process for how we invest these funds in advancing the Puget Sound action agenda. And this is kind of a new model for the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead to engage in this request for proposal process. So we're really excited to kick it off. We recognize that it's a new process for everybody, both ourselves and for you all. And so that leads to questions and a learning curve for everyone. So we're doing our best to make it accessible and as easy to follow along as possible, but we recognize it's a new process. So we're here to answer questions as best we can. And we're really excited for this opportunity to support the work of all of our partners and communities in Puget Sound to advance habitat restoration protection. And Devin, any other final thoughts from you?
Well said, Jennifer. Thank you all for attending today. And please follow up through email if you have any additional questions, and look for the recording of this webinar and our FAQ on our website by the end of this week. Thank you again.